everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah, and today I want to talk to you about triggers. Triggers are situations in our life that reactivate in us strong emotional responses relevant to our past trauma experiences. When a very strong emotion is awakened for us in the present moment, there is a big chance that we have just been transported on an emotional level to an unresolved trauma of ours. Triggers are a bit like metal detectors. There is something valuable to us hidden down deep underground, under the surface. But if we know how to use that metal detector, there is a possibility for us to discover it and reconnect with it. And in this case, those things that are scattered all over the place, are buried underground, and that we have lost touch with, are pieces of our true self. We didn't integrate certain authentic responses to situations in our lives, and therefore we denied parts of our experience that makes us us. But the best way to illustrate how triggers can show up in our life and what to do once we've identified them is, I think, by giving you a real life example. So I'm going to tell you a story today. I have encountered many triggers since beginning my therapy journey, but today I'll use one of those as an example. So a few years ago, I used to live with a very good friend of mine. We had a great time living together. We used to hang out. We used to cook together, eat together, watch telly together. We had our little rituals, like watching first dates together. And after lockdown ended, her boyfriend moved in with us. And I started to feel gradually more isolated and excluded. And even though they were perfectly kind, friendly, they were inclusive, I would deny often their invitations to hang out together because I was feeling quite insecure and shy. And I started to feel resentment build towards my friend. And I started to feel us drifting, or me drifting away from her. One evening, I was sat in my room and I heard them laugh in the kitchen. I felt really lonely. I felt abandoned. I felt forgotten, insignificant. I felt excluded. And I started to sink into a very dark place, the victim mode. I began to hear a voice in my head saying, "She's no longer my friend. She is my enemy. How can she be so cruel and treat me this way? Does our friendship mean anything to her? I don't mean anything to her. She's doing it on purpose. She is laughing loud in the kitchen so that I could hear it, and so that I understand that she is having a great time without me, that she doesn't need me." So that internal dialogue was making me sink deeper and deeper into that dangerous, dark place, the victim mode. And I began to really feel the resentment build. And it felt so tangible that at one point I was ready to end that friendship. So, from having a loyal, lovely, kind, and caring friend to believing that that same girl, that same person is my worst enemy. This was the moment when I became aware that I am confronting a trigger situation. So I made a conscious decision to follow the emotions that were coming up for me. So I sat down in my room. I stepped away from any distractions like the screen, my phone, my laptop, and I just sat down. My room was a safe space, And that's incredibly important when we decide to process emotions, is that we are in a safe, controlled environment. If I am confronted with trigger situations, and I'm in a public space or at an event or a social situation, I tend to step away from that. So I remove myself to the bathroom, or I go into my car. But if I'm in situations that don't lend themselves very well to processing emotions at all, then I would sometimes write down the situation on my phone or on a piece of paper, and write down all the emotions that are coming up for me and their intensity as well. So that when I'm back in a safe, controlled environment, I can revisit that trigger. And in this situation with my flatmate, I sat down, I closed my eyes, and I identified the emotions that were coming up for me. I was feeling resentment towards my friend. I was feeling strong sense of loneliness, strong sense of abandonment, rejection, strong sense of isolation. I felt forgotten, left behind, not heard, not seen, unimportant. I allowed myself to feel all those emotions that were coming up, along with the discomfort that inevitably followed. And I withstood the temptation to distract myself from it. So, oftentimes, when we are about to enter a painful memory, our mind might try to resist opening that gate for us. And in my case, when I'm about to process emotions, I suddenly become very tired. I feel that I don't have enough strength to process, to confront this strong feeling. So thoughts start to come up for me that maybe I should take a nap first and rest before I do this. This is my mind's way of escaping into a different reality and not having to face the pain. So I withstood that temptation to take a nap, to switch on Netflix, to buy a new pair of trainers, to clean my room before I do this, to maybe go out and buy some candles, or to even to call a friend, to go for a drink, to make a snack, to make a cup of tea before I start doing this. I resisted all of that because these are my mind's mechanisms, coping mechanisms to protect me from feeling the pain. So I continued to sit, I continued to feel abandoned, I continued to cry. And then I asked myself a question of, have I ever felt like this before? Does this situation remind me of anything that's already happened in my life? And as I sat there, I noticed that their laughter was an especially triggering detail for me. So I focused on it even more. And that's when I used a method called visualization. I imagined my friend sat in front of me, and I began to talk to her with the words that were coming up for me. I was saying, "Why won't you knock on my door and check on me? Do you not care about me? How can you not care for me? Are you doing this on purpose? Are you laughing there on purpose to hurt me? How can you abandon me like that? How can you reject me like that and not invite me, not include me?" I was saying all those things out loud, and with my eyes closed, imagining she was sat in front of me. After a while of saying those words, I no longer saw my friend, but I saw my mom. I saw a 13-year-old me in my room, in my childhood room, alone, hearing my parents laugh with my brother in the living room, playing a game. Growing up, I was often exiled to my room after fights with my parents. I felt deeply misunderstood, not heard, not seen, very, very lonely and sad. I was the black sheep of the family, so I often felt like I didn't fit in. And the worst thing about this trauma situation for me was that my parents never came to me. They never reached out. They were dealing with their own abandonment wounds, and they felt rejected. So they always waited for me to come and apologize. So it felt like a vicious game to me. Whoever breaks their silence first loses, and I always lost that game. And I uh, spent many situations in that room feeling extremely alone, abandoned, rejected, sad, waiting, crying myself to sleep and waiting for my parents to come and validate my pain and see me and empathize with me and hug me and support me and comfort me. This situation in the present moment was a strong trigger. It was a rail to my past. It was a doorway to an unresolved trauma. There was still a little girl living inside of me, waiting for that compassion, for that empathy, for that warmth, for someone to come in and see her pain of being misunderstood, cast aside, for someone to come and comfort her, for someone to create that sense of safety for her, for someone to include her, for someone to love her, for someone to be there for her. She was still waiting for someone to knock on that door and invite her to be a part of the family, invite her to play, invite her to be together and to feel healthy, safe attachment, to feel bond, to feel connection rather than isolation, rather than rejection and abandonment. I allowed myself to feel those emotions. I was sobbing on the floor. My body was shaking. I was rocking back and forth. I allowed these emotions to flow through my body as they are meant to if we don't suppress them. Our emotions are here to be felt. They are energy in motion. Allow that motion, allow that expression. We can now allow ourselves that expression that might have been forbidden for us. It might have been unsafe for us to express, but now we can do that. We can allow ourselves as long as we are in a safe environment, whether that's in our room on our own or with a therapist. Now it was time for me to ask myself another question. Was there anything that I wasn't allowed to do back then in that source situation? Was I not allowed to stomp my foot or say no or sob or cry loudly or shout? I can allow myself to shout now. I can shout into a pillow, or I can go to the car. I don't have to drive anywhere. I can just shout there and release that energy. Maybe I wasn't allowed to kick. I can lay down on my back and kick in the air. Maybe I wasn't allowed to shake. I can now hide under the duvet and allow my body to shake. It is incredibly important to allow our body the reaction that wasn't allowed, or maybe there was not a space created for us to have it. Your body will guide you to what it needs. It is incredibly important to let that frozen energy in our body melt away for movement. If movement doesn't feel natural or feels very difficult or challenging for you, you can write or draw or doodle. You can put that energy into something tangible. It doesn't have to make any sense. You can just follow a line. As long as it's something physical that you can release that energy. You can write down your emotions. There's a huge stigma around expressing our emotions and the fear of being labeled as looking insane. But most of us carry an avalanche of suppressed emotions, and their intensity can overwhelm at first. So it is super important to reach out for help if we feel like we need support in facing those emotions. But our emotions are an undeniable part of our humanity. No one teaches us emotional hygiene, but it is as important as physiological hygiene, just as our physiology is an undeniable part of our humanity. We have neglected our emotional world for so long that it became seriously overgrown, and because we denied its existence. So it can be frightening to re-enter it because we honestly don't know what's gonna crawl out of there. And that's why it's a process. We're not going to be able to sightsee the entire inner world in one go. We're not going to be able to tidy all of that in one visit. We this happens over time, and we can discover it gradually, but we will discover treasure hiding under all of that ivy, under all the weeds, under all of that overgrowth. So going back to the situation with my flatmate, even though I was revisiting a memory from my childhood, I remained there for myself from the perspective of an adult. So I was seeing the 13-year-old me suffer in that childhood room, but I also visualized myself there from the perspective of adulthood, from where I am now, sitting there and seeing and witnessing her pain. And I didn't try to change anything. I wasn't trying to calm her down or silence her or or improve the situation. I was just providing presence. And at one point I said to her, I am here. I see you. I see how difficult this is for you. I see how much you are hurting. And I was patient with myself. I allowed myself time for those emotions to flow through me. And when I felt like they started to calm down, I asked myself another question. Is there anything I can do? Your inner child will often not trust you the first times you revisit a situation from the past. And that's because we abandon ourselves in our adult life even more than other people have ever abandoned us. So your inner child might only allow you to sit there, to witness her, to validate her pain, to see her reality, to provide compassion, empathy. But they also might ask for a warm blanket or a hot chocolate, or for you to dance with them, or for a hug, or for a walk. This is where healing begins, and it's worth paying attention to what your inner child will ask for, because they hold the key, they hold the answer to your healing. Uh, they will guide you to that cure if you listen to them, if you tune in to their voice. This is the most exciting part about the inner child therapy and about triggers, is that it opens a world in which we can take responsibility for our wounds because we have the resources to heal ourselves. We have all the answers. No YouTuber will tell you what you need or provide you with answers the way sitting in silence with yourself will. No book, no newspaper, no movie, no podcast, no TED Talk will give you a better answer than what you can find searching within yourself. That realization can be terrifying because it points the arrow of responsibility towards us. But it can be so liberating and super empowering because we move from a position of a helpless child waiting to be saved into a position of an adult who can help herself. So in my process, there was one more question to ask. how is this situation from the present moment and with my flatmate different from the source situation in my childhood? And when I checked in with myself, I realized that I didn't feel half as strongly about my flatmate and about her boyfriend as I felt at the beginning of my process. I realized that this situation was very, very different from when I was a child, because I was no longer a helpless little girl. I was an adult capable of communicating my needs. My perspective was valid. I had the right to stand up for myself. I had the right to express myself. I had the right to change my life. I had the power as an adult to take care of my needs and make sure that I feel included. So I approached my friend, I asked for a chat, and I told her that I was missing our time together one on one. It wasn't easy. It was not easy and felt incredibly vulnerable. I was terrified, but she made me feel really seen, really heard. And she agreed with everything I said. She said she missed me too. She didn't know how to approach it. So we had a really long, heartfelt chat about what we can do to improve that situation and to nourish our friendship. Um, and I can honestly say that since that conversation, our friendship blossomed. And to think that I was ready to give up on that friendship, to think that I would have lost a connection, somebody who is like a sister to me now, because I was resenting my parents' behavior and the injustices that I faced over 15 years earlier. We have the resources to act differently now as adults. But when we face triggers or when we are triggered in our life and we are not aware of it, we can often approach those situations from a child's perspective. And we remain stuck in that perspective until we respond to the desperate calls of our inner child calling us home to heal our painful story. Gilbert Renault says that to heal is to grow up, is to acknowledge the wounded child from our past and honor its pain in the present moment. I hope that my example illustrated how we can use triggers to our advantage if we know how to, if we are aware that we can, and if we are aware that we are triggered in that moment. I didn't have those tools. Everything I know, I've learned from my therapists. So it's not something it's not the sort of knowledge that we acquire at school or even from our parents. It's something that we have to reach out for. There's thankfully more and more therapists using and utilizing those methods out there. There's a lot more people talking about it, but I hope that what I've said today gave you an idea of certain ways and methods that can be used to heal. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you at the next video. Bye bye.